Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, when you find your way to watch or listen to this. It's me, Omar from the Hardware Podcast, and Jackson continues his hiatus as he's on transition in his life, a key moment in his life. I'll let him announce that once he comes back in the podcast. But I'm with a guest. We have Bobby from the TNT College Football Podcast, and he's got an amazing podcast, and he's just day by day just giving previews of these teams, just really astute and just in-depth previews on Twitter. So I'll let Bobby introduce himself and just his work.
Hey, Omar, thanks for having me. I'm Bobby Wilson. I host and run the TNT College Football Podcast. I started doing this a little over a year ago. I am a former women's college basketball coach, actually. So once COVID hit, kind of learned that maybe wasn't something I wanted to keep doing, just because I have young kids and a family and everything, and in that whole world of college athletics and coaching is it's a whole animal in itself with the amount of time that it takes away from your family. And I just kind of felt the Lord pulling me in a different direction. So I got a regular job, I guess you could say. And then I started doing a podcast on college football. I've always been very passionate about college football. It's something I enjoy and love. And one of my goals has always been and is continuing to attend a home game at all 131 and counting FBS stadiums. So it's in its infancy stage, but nonetheless, it's a work in progress. But yeah, like you said, right now I'm going through breaking down every single program in the country. I do 2 a day. I started a month ago, and I'm going till the week of week 0 kicking off. So it's a time-consuming thing, but it's a lot of fun, and it's getting great interactions on Twitter, so that's exciting. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited for where your podcast is going. Like, the previews are great, honestly. I know I've engaged in a couple too. I'm not sure if I think you've done the service academies right now, or at this point, or at least Army at this point, or if
Just
I'm not
Navy.
mistaken.
Just
Just Navy.
Navy.
Okay, yeah, I commented
Yeah.
on Navy for sure. I remember that because, I mean, no
Mhm.
bias too. I
Yep.
mean, it's just an interesting situation. Is Kenny Matsulola in the hot seat? I think he is. I think, honestly, he kind of saved his job, in the
Mhm.
upset victory against Army last year. So we'll see what happens this
Absolutely.
year. But the offense isn't getting any better. But that's not why we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about not the AAC, but the ACC.
Mhm.
And if
Yes.
you listen or watch the Hardware Podcast, you know that Jackson and I go through week by week and look at the Heisman race and at times the Walter Payton Award and FCS, and also really any college football award that comes to mind has an interesting race. So what better way to sort of, I guess, kind of wet your palates before the college football season with a little bit of Heisman talk. And off the top of my head, if you listen to the podcast or listen to watch it, you know that I'm a group of 5 guy at heart. So it's very rare that something in the Power 5 really catches my attention. But I've just been so amazed just thinking about this quarterback class that's coming out of the ACC this year. And that's what we're here to talk about, Heisman prospects, one by one, of 4 guys, the 4 guys that I think have the best shot, I think, at Heisman prospects, in my opinion, just by past body of work. And there may be a 5th guy. I know, Bobby, we were talking about this guy beforehand, but I mean, we can even discuss him on the pod as well, because he plays on a name brand program, a program that has a bigger brand name than all these programs we're going to talk about. So that definitely helps a lot in Heisman talk. So in terms of the ACC quarterbacks, I mean, I guess we'll start, from I guess the most well-known to the least well-known in terms of Heisman. So in my opinion, I think the most well-known guy on our list right now is Sam Hartman, I think. Partly because he's been around forever. He's probably the only 5th-year junior I've ever seen in my life, just given because he was injured in 2019. Yeah, the extra year in the pandemic. But Sam Hartman's a guy who's like, his game I like a lot, not because of, I guess statistics. I guess part of it is statistics with the 39 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, but the style of play, it just represents just like a classic gunslinger. Like, Sam Hartman is just a gunslinger. Like, I mean, his completion percentage is below 60%, 59% completion percentage, 39 touchdowns last year, over 4,000 yards. Also a very good runner. He's not afraid to take a hit running the ball as well. Had 11 rushing touchdowns, 50 total touchdowns is nothing to really, I guess, like, sneeze at, So even in a 14-game season. It's an amazing season for Sam Hartman. And there is beginning to be some Heisman talks last year. I mean, they might have been just murmurs when Wake Forest started, I think, 7-0. or whatever, and then reached the top 10 for the first time ever as a program. But there's still Heisman talk. It was still Heisman talk nonetheless, which is rare for a guy from Wake Forest, especially a quarterback. So, Bobby, I want to know your thoughts on Sam Hartman as a player in general and in the Heisman race too.
Well, first off, I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's a fantastic player. He threw for almost 4,300 yards last season, and was his actual statistical yardage point was the sixth most in ACC history. And I personally believe if he was on one of the big name, quote unquote, blue blood programs, that he would be a surefire Heisman finalist. I think he's that good as a quarterback. Like you said, I mean, the amount of touchdowns he had throwing and rushing, I mean, his numbers are eye popping. I mean, he is on it. Yes, it might be part of that system. He's in a gunslinger system, but at the same time, I mean, I really feel if he was at a Clemson or Ohio State or USC or one of these bigger name programs, that he would be a surefire Heisman guy.
Oh, sorry, a little bit of technical difficulties, fat fingered on my computer a bit. But yeah, I totally agree as well. I mean, and you just look at the quarterback pedigree of a school like Wake Forest. I know when John Wolford started the week 17 game in 2020, the stat came out, or actually not even John Wolford, sorry, when it was Kendall Hinton who started the game for the Broncos as their emergency quarterback. He was the first person to start a game from Wake Forest in the NFL at quarterback since Norm Snead in the 1970s. So it's like not
That's
much of a
crazy.
quarterback pedigree. Yeah, it was pretty crazy to me too that they didn't, I guess, have a good enough quarterback, I guess, to start an NFL game. So the quarterback pedigree isn't there. I mean, I know people, I grew up watching Riley Skinner for Wake Forest, lead them to the Orange Bowl, so I mean, but even then, not a
He was
pro,
good.
yeah, it was good. Not an elite quarterback though. He's a winner. That's what he was. But
Right.
Sam Hartman has the stats on his side, the system's there. A.T. Perry returns. I like his chances, honestly. And it's like you say, I think it's not just the program itself, but I think it's also the schedule. Because if you look at Wake Forest's schedule, and this is a trend typical of schools like Wake Forest, Boston College, Vanderbilt, the private Power 5 programs where their non-conference schedules aren't as challenging. You look at the schedule this year, VMI, which is a program on the rise nonetheless, but still FCS program, Vanderbilt. And that's a game that's going to be at noon Eastern. It's a Power 5 game. It's going to be at noon Eastern, though. Liberty, you have post Malik Willis Liberty. Arguably, the hardest challenge is against Army at home. I mean, we all remember that shootout last year. I mean, I remember dreadfully where Sam Hartman. I think this is when I became a Sam Hartman believer, not because he did it against my team, but just the eye-popping stats where he had 29 passes, but 458 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, people don't realize Army put up 56. They put up 56 points, and for the first time since 2007, they had a quarterback throw 3 touchdowns in a game. Like, this was a generational performance by this Army offense, but Sam Hartman was just so good on that day that he just showed out and just overcame that. So, but the one thing I have against Sam Hartman, I love his play as a player, but my friend and I, he's a big Sam Hartman fan because of the Netflix series he was on, QB1. He likes Sam Hartman a lot. I always joke about the narrative, and the narrative for me is interceptions in big games. And for me, it just doesn't seem like Sam Hartman comes out in big games, and like it's not a dig at him. It's just like what I've seen in the past, with the Duke's Mayo Bowl in 2020, called that a big game or not. It was a bowl game and everything, but he had I think the 3 straight interceptions on consecutive drives against Wisconsin, 4 for that game. The ACC title game, which I went to, saw that meltdown in person where he had 4 picks and he just looked like 2018 Sam Hartman. So that's like the one thing against him. But I feel like if he shows out in these big games, especially against Clemson, and I mean, with the guys we're talking about, the ACC Atlantic is a quarterback heavy division. If he just wins these quarterback duels against the guys we're talking about and just wins some shootouts, I think he can find himself in the Heisman talk.
I agree. I mean, I completely agree with the point you made about the interceptions in big games. That is definitely the hit against him. I mean, he definitely needs to step up and play bigger in those big games. And like you said, I mean, he's going to have a handful of them this year going up against some other really good quarterbacks.
Absolutely. I mean, there'll be some shootouts for sure. I mean, maybe the Wake Forest defense is more experienced. I mean, you'd have more knowledge on that than me. I'm not as informed about their defensive caliber this year. But if the defense looks the same as it did last year, then I mean, the onus will be on him and A.T. Perry to really show out in some games.
I mean, it will be a little bit better, I think, but I think it's always going to be on their offense. I mean, they just the history of that program and what it takes to win there. I mean, they usually do have to put up a ton of points. So, I mean, I will say their defense should be a little bit better, but it's not going to be like an eye popping, like a ring difference, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I would think the same thing as well. I mean, maybe there's room for improvement, but I mean, there is room for improvement, but I mean, we'll just have to see. I mean, uh,
Mhm.
addition, before I turn the page here, I don't think there's ever been a Wake Forest quarterback, much less a Wake Forest player's ever gotten Heisman votes, as far as I'm concerned. I just don't think there's been one, at least in recent memory, or I mean, at least ever,
Right.
that's gotten Heisman votes in the top 10. So Sam Hartman would, in a sense, be a generational player for the Demon Deacons. So I'm excited to see what he does this year. He looks, I think he's projecting pretty low in the NFL draft in like relative to the quarterbacks in this class. We're seeing names like Will Levis, Grayson McCall, a guy that you like a lot on your Twitter page, Grayson McCall.
Man, don't get me
And
started.
oh, I love him too. I'm an option guy. I'm an option. I love the option. I just love
Yep.
that system at
Yep.
Coastal Carolina. And I love Grayson McCall a lot. I love the way their system is and everything. I guess on another tangent too, I think Michael Pratt can be a guy like Grayson McCall, but you know, Tulane's getting rid of that option type system. So I mean, we'll see where that goes. But again, talking about the ACC, not the AAC. So as I turn the page here, the next guy that I guess has gotten a lot of hype as we're going from a most hype to least hype. I think I've seen a lot of, I almost called him Dennis Leary. I've seen a lot of Devin Leary, seen a lot of Devin Leary talk for the Heisman this year. And honestly, I really respect it. I agree in a good amount of it. He had 35 touchdowns, 5 picks last year. I think he threw for over 3,400 yards, if I'm not mistaken. But
Mhm.
the one knock with him, I mean, he had some pretty solid games too as well. He had some pretty solid games as well. But I think the one knock against him is him being a pocket passer. And in this day and age in college football, I feel like it's very hard for a pure pocket passer to win the Heisman. I mean, we saw Mac Jones in 2020, be a finalist and end up like in the top four. But even then, he had some amount of running game he has some amount of mobility, to his game. Devin Leary doesn't seem to have much mobility to his game, and I think that'll hurt him in the Heisman race. But I'm excited for what NC State does, and I gotta ask Bobby, are you on the Devin Leary and I guess much more the NC State hype train?
Before I did my breakdown of NC State, I wasn't at all. I always feel NC State is one of those programs that does better when the expectations aren't as high. That just with the history that they've had. Um, so I mean, I had to do a little bit more research on him to like really understand like how talented he is and how good he is as a quarterback. I mean, he went 6 straight games without throwing an interception last year. He threw for over 300 yards in 6 different games. And like you said, I mean, he's definitely a pocket passer. So he they lose a couple running backs. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how that goes for them. Because like you said, I mean, he needs that aspect to his game. He needs the play action. He needs those things to be able to work for him. But I mean, after I did research on him and we looked into it, I mean, he is a really, really talented guy. I mean, he fits the pro systems well, I think. Like you said, the one hit is, can he move around a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, in a day and age, it's funny I always say this because like you look at the year 2000 and we say something like this: can a pocket passer win the Heisman? You know, a year after Chris Weinke won the Heisman for Florida State, and it's like that's bogus. You know, there will never be a day when a pocket passer will have trouble winning the Heisman. But it's just like we long for those exciting Heisman moments. Like when we think of like Lamar Jackson's Heisman moment, I think about that game against Florida State where like he spun into the end zone after two
Yep.
Florida State players hit him, and whatnot. Or even I guess the Virginia game kind of counts when he had the game-winning touchdown against Virginia. But I mean, we hardly think
Mhm.
about a quarterback standing in the pocket and like having a 5 touchdown pass game and everything. There's got to be some element of run game, I guess, to that excitement. So I will say this though. I think the biggest thing we lost last year with the college football season was when the Holiday Bowl was canceled because I think the world deserved a Dorian Thompson Robinson and Devin Leary quarterback duo. I mean, that would have been amazing to see.
A
I'm a guy that's
shootout.
high on DTR. Shootout, yeah, exactly. I'm high on DTR, especially this year when the pieces started to come together for Chip Kelly's offense last year, and like I can just imagine how good they're going to be this year. One of their final years in the Pac-12, which is another discussion. So that's my point of that. I guess much of the same thing with Sam Hartman. A lot of the schools that we're going to be going, or a lot of the quarterbacks we're going over, is the non-conference schedule is a bit troublesome. There really isn't much tests. I mean, week one for true college football fans, that should be a delight having a Holton Ahlers and a truly improved East Carolina program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, going to Dowdy-Ficklen too. That's I didn't even notice that game was at Dowdy-Ficklen until I looked it up. So going to Dowdy-Ficklen as well. And then you have a game against Charleston Southern, the customary FCS game. Texas Tech is a sneaky good game, but that's a program that's a mid-level, an average Power 5 program. I mean, a big game there. It doesn't really turn many heads. I mean, they have their reputation for having bad defense, honestly. Even if their defense has improved, it's still Texas Tech. We still have the memories of like Pat Mahomes, like doing all he can and just not having much to show for
800 yards passing and still barely winning.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. We still have those memories too. And then, I mean, you're wearing a UConn hat. I mean, I'm not trying to dogpile on the Huskies, but we both know it has been the fairest of weather for the Huskies.
Absolutely.
I'll say that. I'll just leave it at that. So, he's really gonna have to make his money in the Heisman race with these conference games. And the one thing that always gets me is I feel like if the Clemson game were later, I always feel like the NC State Clemson game, the Textile Bowl, is always so early in the season where, I mean,
yes.
You put the Textile Bowl later in the year last year. I think Devin Leary kind of gains more traction in the Heisman race. Maybe gets like, in the top 10, maybe. I don't know. I just feel like the game's always early, and that always hurts, Heisman chances of a guy like Devin Leary, and even like a few years ago, like Ryan Finley and whatnot. So that's just my opinion on the outlook of the schedule.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it definitely means something to have those games later in the year where you can have that Heisman moment later in the season where the voters can see you. I mean, to perform when it matters in November. I absolutely agree with that. To end the year, they get in November, they get Wake Forest, Boston College, at Louisville, and at North Carolina. So I mean, they have 3 other quarterbacks we're going to be talking. So, I mean, he's going to have an opportunity there. But, I mean, we all understand that Clemson is Clemson, and that's the big game when it comes to the ACC schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Even then, like last year, in a down year when Clemson really did not look impressive, especially on offense, like that was a team to beat. And they proved that they were the top dog still in beating Wake Forest late in the year. I think one game that might benefit him is the UNC game on Black Friday. A very light slate that day. That game could very well end up on ABC in front of a bunch of, a country of cord cutters, especially in this day and age where, we're back to the time. It's funny how I guess time's a flat circle, how we're back to the time where a game on ABC means something again. Now with the whole streaming era and everything. So, maybe a game on a light slate on a Black Friday can vault Devin Leary into the Heisman, into like the, I guess, serious Heisman talks to solidify it further. So we'll see with Devin Leary in the Wolfpack. I mean, I agree too that NC State seems to do better when expectations are lower, honestly, because I mean, 2017, they had a great year. We hyped them in 2018. They ended up having a average NC State type year, and that's that. So that's I mean, I agree with you on most of your points about Devin Leary. Going on to the next quarterback, who's I feel like a bit of a, I guess, next up, I guess, in the most hyped is Malik Cunningham. I think Malik Cunningham. So for me, when I thought about the quarterbacks, the one thing that comes to mind is I feel like him and Lamar Jackson have something in common, and it's like not just mobility, not just their play style, but the fact that they have like a very signature game that's almost transcendent. Lamar Jackson at the 2015 Music City Bowl, that sort of started the Heisman hype. I remember watching that game and thinking to myself, and then I started watching Lamar Jackson highlights that summer, the summer of 2016. I thought to myself, I told my friend, I was like, this guy's gonna win the Heisman. I was like, this guy's, from what I saw, especially the Music City Bowl, like this man's gonna win the Heisman. I think it was like the fourth 200 game in FBS history or something like that. Malik Cunningham, of course, late in the year against Duke, he pulled the Tuiasosopo, which is something I coined in our chat beforehand. The Tuiasosopo, named after Marcus Tuiasosopo, is an achievement where a quarterback throws for 300 and runs for 200. Well, Malik Cunningham and Marcus Tuiasosopo, the great Washington quarterback, who I just want to say that he is underappreciated, because if Marcus Tuiasosopo played today, he would definitely be
Oh, would
appreciated, be
be.
a Heisman
Oh my.
finalist.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I mean, I just got to say that's my soapbox that I'll always stand on. But he was only one of two quarterbacks to have a 300-200 game, and honestly, he probably had one of a top 5 year among quarterbacks, I think, in a FBS. If you just look at the stats, I mean, 20 rushing touchdowns, 6 yards per carry with sacks. I wasn't able to calculate the yards per carry without sacks, but it's probably somewhere near 7 or 8 yards per carry. Over 1,000 yards passing ball. He had 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Just a great, well-rounded quarterback. And you think he's a better passer than Lamar Jackson. So I want to hear your thoughts on Malik Cunningham, Bobby.
Man, I love Malik Cunningham, and that's one of the programs this year that I'm making sure that I go see, because he's electric. I mean, and I agree with you. Going back to Lamar Jackson, I mean, that going into that off season, it was just like one of those things after that Music City Bowl game where it was just like, holy smokes, this guy he's different. I mean, it's like you just think about like Michael Vick at Virginia Tech and those type of, like, it was just one of those things where it's like I had to go back and watch him, just like you were talking about. So I mean, just he was a video game cheat code. I mean, but going with Malik, I mean, his downfall coming into last season was throwing too many picks, throwing too many interceptions, and he cut that down drastically. So I think that was a big deal for him to. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just my camera paused, so I'm just trying to figure that out. But I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. I think him cutting down on those interceptions was just an absolute huge thing for him and for the Louisville offense. Like I said, he struggled with that in 2020, and just for him to come back and cut it down to only 6 interceptions really made a huge difference. And then you hit on the 20 rushing touchdowns. I mean, for a running back, that's incredible, let alone a quarterback. I mean, just for him to be able to do that he's a game changer. I remember watching that Duke game, and I understand it's Duke, and Duke's not the greatest team, but the fact that you're able to throw for 300 yards and rush for 200 yards, I don't care who you're playing. He could have done that against a high school team. I don't care. That's unbelievable either way. I mean, just to be able to do that is really mind-blowing to me. I mean, it was a moment where you were literally sitting there watching it and be like, that moment changed his life. And he's going to have an opportunity to play on Sundays just because of a moment like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna have to go off camera, I guess, for the time being until my camera trouble is resolved. But yeah, like that's a transcendent, like that's a night where like I just remember sitting on my couch, like I wasn't particularly interested in that game because it was Duke. It had no bearing in the bowl races, because I'm huge in the bowl races. No bearing in anything at all. But once I saw that he was on track to do something historical, especially like after that zigzagging run he had against the Duke defense, that's the one that's a run that everyone remembers. So I mean, I'm just excited for Malik Cunningham. I almost said Malik Willis, from Malik Cunningham this year.
Hey, I've done that before too.
Yeah, and like I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can attest to this too, Bob, but I feel like we haven't appreciated Malik Cunningham as much because he followed Lamar. And I think we talked about this too. We're like, because the drop off in Louisville football was so immediate and so sudden after Lamar Jackson left, we kind of just like threw him off our radar, honestly. And then Malik Cunningham was having nice years and sort of developing in a very steady trajectory up until this past year. He's not done developing, of course. So I just think that we just underappreciate him throughout his career, and like this year is kind of his great swan song to college football fans, where like we really notice him.
I agree. I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, obviously you follow somebody like Lamar Jackson, who's a generational type talent at quarterback. There's going to be a drop off, of course. I mean, you're putting in a young guy at quarterback like Malik was at the time, and who has the same type of skill set, so he's automatically going to be compared to him. Unfortunately for his case, with being a young quarterback, but now that he's developed and turned into what he has become and what he's going to continue to be this year, I'm really, really high on him and the Louisville Cardinals heading into this season. They have a difficult schedule. I mean, their first two games are on the road, and then their first home game is against Florida State on a Friday night. So I mean, they're going to be tested right away, but they have a guy at quarterback who's going to be able to handle it. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned the schedule as well, the tests, like Florida State, I think their schedule is probably the most beneficial out of all the guys we're talking about because, I mean, you look at the UCF game, that game's going to be high scoring nonetheless. I mean, Gus Malzahn's got that offense back rolling back to what it was, I think, under Scott Frost. You have that game. Also, too, just looking down the line, the big one, the Bluegrass battle against Kentucky, where, again, another great quarterback game with Will Levis. And not just Will Levis, but that game's going to be high profile because, I mean, Kentucky's going to contend in the SEC East. But also, you got Chris Rodriguez. You got Chris Rodriguez running the ball for Kentucky as well. So, I mean, there's just plenty of talent in Kentucky. I wouldn't say the eyes of the country will be on that game, but it will be high profile with Kentucky, potentially being a top 15 team at the time. And even Louisville, I can see them cracking top 25, depending on how the Atlantic shakes out. I just think there's so many contenders in the Atlantic that it's within the realm of possibility to believe that Louisville could, be not a front runner, but could contend for a spot in Charlotte by the time that game happens, they could be in contention. So, I think his schedule is definitely the most favorable out of any of the quarterbacks we're talking about.
I agree. I think those last three games, kind of something that we hinted to before. They play at Clemson, they host NC State, and they go to Kentucky. I mean, that's a gauntlet, let's just say. I mean, so Malik is going to have a huge opportunity to play three very good teams. And obviously, like you said, the eyes of the country will be on those three games. I mean, those are big games, especially if Louisville is able to fare well in the beginning of their schedule. If they're able to come into those games contending, then it's really going to be a spotlight for Malik Cunningham to be able to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's again, like we said, the schedule's most favorable. And like if they're in the thick of that race with again, how exciting he is, the highlight reel plays that he has, he definitely has a real shot. And like maybe we can vault him, over Devin Leary for likelihood now that we discussed it, because I mean, I feel like the pieces are more likely to fall into place for Malik Cunningham than they are for Devin Leary as in terms of the Heisman race. So turning the page to our next quarterback, we're going to go to, the Northeast, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, for one Phil Dracovic. And this is a guy that another one of my colleagues, John, who we do the Northeast Bowl Rush. It's a fun time. We discussed the Northeast Bowl scenarios, and he's always been high ever since 2020. He's been high on Phil Dracovic. He said last year that he was a dark horse Heisman contender. And honestly, I agreed, because people were high on Boston College after they almost upset Clemson on the road, even though they were down with Trevor Lawrence that game. They almost upset Clemson on the road in 2020. They played very competitively against Notre Dame that same year. So, I mean, people are high on Boston College for the same reason, and I'm high on them this year as well because of what they returned in addition to Dracovic. You got a guy like Pat Garwo, a great running back, which we'll talk a little bit more. I'll talk a little bit more about him and how he plays into this. And then Zay Flowers, a great pro-ready receiver. I mean, Dracovic in 2020, he had 17 touchdowns, 5 picks, didn't make many mistakes, averaged over 250 yards per game in 10 games started. He missed a game, which is a recurring theme because last year he was very injury prone. I wouldn't say injury prone. He just had a big injury in the UMass game and ended up only playing 6 games that whole year. But I feel like if there is ever a great moment that we didn't talk about enough in college football last year, it was Phil Dracovic's return in the Friday night game against Virginia Tech, yes, where Boston College released that tweet. They released the Michael Jordan-esque tweet, "I'm back." And it was amazing. It was amazing how they played that out. And he had a gritty performance. It wasn't the best. Only had, I think, 113 yards, but ran the ball well that game. I mean, a lot of people look at Boston College and they think, it's a pro style offense, not much of a running quarterback element to it. But I mean, Dracovic brings that running element, excuse me. In 2020, he had 94 yards against Georgia Tech and a touchdown. In 2021 against Georgia Tech, he had 3 rushing touchdowns and 71 yards. He's a running threat. Even in 6 games last year, he had over 300 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. So he's a great threat on the ground. And honestly, I think Jeff Hafley is a way better play calling coach than Steve Adazio ever was, or I guess that staff
Absolutely.
ever was, because what I think about, I look at stats like this for Dracovic, and I wonder what Anthony Brown could have done in Jeff Hafley's system, because Anthony Brown, I mean, his first couple of years he had AJ Dillon to lean on, and that was the Adazio model. Have a really good running back and just hand the ball to him on first, second, third down, and on fourth down maybe hand the ball off to him too. Pat Garwo was a great running back, but something that the Boston College offense hasn't had is great play calling to optimize solid quarterbacks and a solid running game. So I'm excited for where Boston College is going to be this year. And I think Hafley is the right guy for the job. I mean, in terms of the pieces he has on offense and just a play calling. So I want to know your thoughts on good old Phil Dracovic.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, what last year, I thought that Boston College was going to be the sleeper team nationally. I really thought that they were going to potentially win 9 or 10 games, and Phil Jacobic's injury obviously had a lot to do with that. But I also thought he was a Heisman contender, like a sleeper Heisman contender. I mean, he's just a gritty quarterback. I mean, like you were saying, I mean, he runs the ball extremely well. He just gets those tough yards when you need him. And I mean, that performance, like you said, when he came back, just a gritty performance, and just I'm a big fan of his. I like quarterbacks who can give you that running element, but also can pass the ball really well and are accurate like he is. But I love that gritty aspect that he brings to it. And I think he fits really, really well into like that Boston persona, and he fits the program and the area really, really well. I just think he's just the perfect guy to represent that university and that program.
Yeah, I totally agree as well. Just blue collar. I mean, even then, like I like Boston College's persona. Like, while yes, I was ragging on the play calling and not optimizing the quarterbacks, there's just something in this day and age about a team that just runs the ball and runs a pro style
Mhm.
scheme in college football. It just runs the ball down your throat, and just like they're not afraid to do it. Um, you just look at the difference. It was night and day. Like, no offense to their back quarterback Dennis Grosel, but he lacked a lot of the skill set that Phil Dracovic did last year, and the offense struggled. I mean, they had the
Right.
great start, 4-0. They had the great 4-0 start, and then you sort of saw the wheels fall off where the offense wasn't explosive. I mean, Dracovic plays against Clemson. They win that game. I mean, I
Mhm.
went to that game in Death Valley. It was only a 2-hour drive away from me at the time. And I was just thinking, like, this Boston College offense looks horrible right now. I mean, it's just, there's no way around it, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited for what Boston College does this year. And again, we talk about the trends with schools like Boston College, the private schools in FBS, their scheduling trends. The schedule doesn't favor Dracovic much, not in a non-conference way. He's got Rutgers. Rutgers is getting better, but that's highly a high-profile game. I mean, maybe he'll get some eyes in the New York City market. Maybe that's a plus with that one. There's also the main game. He's got the UConn game, and I forget the last game that's
At
on
Notre
that's on
Dame.
at Notre Dame. Okay, Notre Dame. Okay, so he's got the Holy War. So I take that back. So that one is very optimal too. I mean, a game on NBC. So that's very favorable for him as well. And again, as we talked about with all the other quarterbacks in the Atlantic, I mean, it's going to be a shootout for who's going to be the best. And I guess maybe not in Phil Jacobs' case, a shootout. But I mean, if he has a strong performance against Sam Hartman, Malik Cunningham, the quarterbacks we've talked about, then I can see him definitely rising up. And if Boston College makes their rise to a New Year's Six bowl berth, which would be their first one since I think I guess the 1985 Cotton Bowl would be the last one. But even then, it wasn't really a New Year's Six game. I mean, heck, the New Year's Six didn't exist, you know, as it did, or even the BCS. So I mean, that'll be the biggest bowl game since that one. Definitely a great storyline for a Heisman candidate.
Absolutely. And I mean, I really think that he has all the tools to be a first round pick as a quarterback. I mean, I think he's everything you want from a quarterback, especially like he plays in the pro system. He just he fits so well. And you mentioned Flowers. I think he's unbelievably gifted. I think he's another first round type talent as well. I mean, just the way he can, as many deep balls as he catches, I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think the sky's the limit for this team. I think the schedule is a little more difficult this year from the ACC perspective than it was last year. But at the same time, that helps when it comes to Heisman moments.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Boston College playing impactful games, and especially it'll be a type of thing too, where it's like I wouldn't say a once in a lifetime run, but it's definitely going to be a rare run if they make a run to the New Year's Six. It'll kind of have like that feel like I guess in 2020 when Indiana was making their run to the New Year's Six, or like
Yes.
when Northwestern was making their run to the New Year's Six, where it's like we're witnessing something rare kind of happen. And like I know in the podcast back in 2020 with Jackson, I considered Mike Penix a dark horse Heisman candidate for that reason, where it's like this is a run that's, it's we're hardly going to see it ever again for Indiana. So, let's enjoy the moment and get Mike Penix these Heisman votes. Pretty much the same thing with Bill Dracovic. If they make it to New Year's Six, which I'm not sure where the semifinals are this year. Is it the orange and cotton this year for the New Year's Six?
I honestly don't
I
know.
guess for the semifinals, but it just depends, I guess, how many at-large spots there would be, because I don't see them winning the ACC. But if they can get in the top 12 as an at-large, or I guess not even in the top 12, if they can, like, I call it the loophole, where it's like the conference champion makes makes the New Year's, or makes the playoff, and the next highest ranked team makes that conference's New Year's Six game, like per se a
Mhm.
Big Ten West team making the Rose Bowl because Ohio State's in the playoff. That's kind of like that loophole. If they like have that loophole like that, and they end up making it making it to the Orange Bowl or something like that, then give Phil Dracovic his Heisman votes. So that's all I got
Absolutely.
to say about Phil. Yeah. So I know I hinted at the beginning about a bonus quarterback that we talked about beforehand coming from a name brand program. If you're a diehard college football fan, you probably know we're talking about Tyler Van Dyke, who had a great year out of Miami. And I see Bobby kind of scrambling the computer. I'm sorry to do this to you. I guess you didn't have a
No, it's
research
good.
prepared.
It's good.
I didn't have any either. So I'm in the same spot. I didn't have any either. I'm scrambling too. But Tyler Van Dyke is a guy that I'm already like, we're both already seeing like him on the NFL high on like NFL draft boards, honestly. And I didn't get to see him much. But Van Dyke's, if you want to talk about, I guess, night and day, I guess, or in terms of, I guess, opposites, you look at De'Aaron King, great mobile quarterback, maybe less mobile in 2021 because of his knee injury, but a very mobile quarterback, a very wide open type of player. Compared to Tyler Van Dyke, a good pocket passer, a guy who has all the tools, I guess, that NFL teams look for, or NFL teams did look for, and up until recently. I mean, Van Dyke is a guy that's high on NFL draft boards. He had a great year last year, had 2,900 yards, only starting 10 games, 25 touchdowns, 6 touchdown passes, and he plays for Miami to boot. I mean, Miami, say what you want, they've fallen on tough times. Maybe they're out of their element in the ACC, but it's still the U. I mean, it's still probably like I'd say the second or third biggest name brand. You can give or take on whether them or Florida State is a bigger brand, but probably the second or third biggest brand in the ACC at the moment. I mean, he has that working for him, and if he has a nice year, I mean, you can put him ahead of all these guys. So I want to hear your thoughts, Bobby.
Right. I mean, he finished last season probably hotter than almost any quarterback in the country. The last 6 games he threw for at least 316 passing yards in all those games. So I mean, he was playing really, really well at the end of the season. I think the one that stands out to me was when he outdueled Heisman finalist Kenny Pickett when they upset Pitt. He threw for 426 yards in that game. So I mean, he, like you said, he's at a program that's going to get the notoriety, and he ended the year tremendously. So I think he's in a good spot coming into the season, just because I think there's going to be eyes on them with Mario Cristobal, and I think he's obviously doing a tremendous job recruiting, which I mean I think we all knew that would happen because of his pedigree, but I think they're set up really, really well. That the challenge will be for them is they need a bunch of new wide receivers to step up. But I think Tyler Van Dyke is talented enough to kind of mask that and get away with it.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, like Miami, you know, recruiting in Florida, I don't think getting athletes or receivers is going to be such an issue, honestly.
Right.
I mean, there's no shortage of great athletes in the state of Florida, especially in the state of Miami, as Howard Schnellenberger called it. You know, there's no shortage of athletes there. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he does, and of course, not just a name brand. I mean, you look at, I guess. I guess bringing the name brand thing like a step further, you look at rivalries. Florida State, Miami. If Florida State gets their act together and is even looking like a contending team at by November 5th, when that game comes on, that game ends up being a primetime game, like there you have it. That's a chance for Tyler Van Dyke to have a Heisman moment right
Yep.
there, just on the crux of that rivalry alone. And then you look at non-conference schedule as well. You look at the game against Texas A&M, already a prime time selection that night. I mean, it should. I mean, that's another coming out party for Tyler Van Dyke too. I mean, it's early in the season. It's Texas A&M, the SEC. I think. Shoot, the quarterback. I mean, the quarterback changed for Texas A&M. I think it's the guy from LSU. I forget the guy from LSU's
Yeah.
name.
Yep. Yep.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, he's got a great reputation. So yeah, like I mean, he's the opportunities are there, and also too, we've known that the path to the ACC title game has way less friction in the ACC Coastal than it does in the Atlantic. So he can coast through Sam Howell-less UNC squad, a Kenny Pickett-less Pittsburgh squad, Georgia Tech's on a down year. I mean, Georgia Tech's been kind of down, and nothing that I see sort of resembles a team that's going to be resurrected this year, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs going to Alabama. Who else is in the Coastal? I mean, Virginia as well. I mean, Virginia's had strong teams, but again, I
I
mean,
think Virginia is going to struggle without Mendenhall as the coach. I think
okay,
it's just
okay.
going to be a big. I think it's going to be a big transition for them.
Yeah, shoot. I mean, I just said Virginia. I can't believe I forgot this guy. You know, this at the start of rankings, but Brennan Armstrong. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about Brennan Armstrong really quick because I know I left him out of my original rankings too, but I guess it just shows. I guess with the discussion with Brennan Armstrong being a Heisman candidate, I think last year Brennan Armstrong should have been a top 5 Heisman candidate. He was leading the country in total offense until late in the season when he got injured. He had an opportunity. Had he played in that game against Notre Dame that was on Saturday Night Football, I really think it would
Mm-hmm.
have done wonders for his Heisman candidacy. But again, just like coming from Virginia, sort of the not a football power label hurts him a lot, the same way it hurts Sam Hartman. So I guess really quick, I guess this will be our last quarterback. It just shows how deep the ACC is at the quarterback position, probably the deepest in the Power Five. Like, what are your thoughts on Brennan Armstrong's Heisman outlook?
I mean, his stats are eye popping. That's for sure. I mean, like you said, I mean, he didn't even play in every game, and he still threw for almost 4,500 yards. I mean, it was just eye popping what he was able to do. And then he can run the ball a little bit too. I mean, he had 9 rushing touchdowns too. So I mean, he gives you a little bit of everything. I mean, the fact that they went 6-6 last year with how well he played, kind of hints to what I was thinking, that they might fall off a little bit. But I mean, he's an NFL type talent. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he does, honestly. It just seems like under the radar, Virginia's producing some very nice quarterbacks. I mean, Bryce
Mm-hmm.
Perkins, Virginia. I'm surprised that he didn't really get much of a pro look because that guy was a winner. He was frankly a winner at a school that's very tough to win at. So yeah, Brendan Armstrong, the same thing too. I think he's another player whose defense lets him down because for the team to be averaging 392 yards per game, and for you in particular as Brendan Armstrong, I guess averaging almost 400 yards per game passing, and for the teams to go 6-6 and their defense to allow, I guess, 31 points per game. That man was failed by his defense. And again, it
Right.
just seemed like the pandemic last year came for all the best quarterback matchups in bowl games with all those bowl cancellations because we missed out on Virginia SMU in the Fenway Bowl with Brandon Armstrong versus Tanner Mordecai. We missed out on that. I mean, that would have been amazing TV. But hopefully we get to see Brennan Armstrong in a bowl game this next year. I do think it'll be tough for him with Virginia, like you said, with a Bronco Mendenhall, a year of transition for them as well. Their schedule as well. It doesn't seem very favorable. As I'm pulling it up right now, and here it is at Richmond,
There's a
Illinois.
game that catches my eye.
For non-conference, I'm
for
looking.
non-conference.
Oh, the coastal game. Yeah, I've heard
Yes.
about that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess if Coastal Carolina comes in ranked pretty high, which as an Army fan, I'm hoping the Army spoils their party, in the home opener, that is a very great under the radar week 1 game.
Oh yeah, that's an
Army versus
absolutely
Coastal
great game.
Carolina. I'm excited for that too. Um, it's a shame it didn't happen last year when I was in Georgia, and I was a couple hours away. I was about 3.5 hours away from Myrtle Beach. Definitely would have popped by for that one. But I mean, Brennan Armstrong versus Grayson McCall. It's like, what more can you ask for? But it's just so weirdly placed in late November. It's like
Right.
I just kind of wonder what the schedule makers were thinking, because it's just weird. It's kind of a weird thing. But yeah, that game, it's good. It's good you brought that to my attention, because I heard someone talking about that a few weeks ago, and then you just jogged my memory about that really under the radar great game. But yeah, the schedule is favorable for him. But again, like I feel like playing in the Coastal too, like, and if you're not the team that's winning the Coastal, it's very hard to get national recognition. If you're just a team that goes, say, 7-5 and goes to the Military Bowl, you put up great stats in the Coastal. Like, yeah, you play the same teams that Miami did and everything, but you just didn't win probably the weakest division in the Power Five. So
Right. No,
yeah,
I agree with
that's
you.
yeah. No,
I
go
mean,
ahead. Sorry.
no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the defense failed them. I mean, when you throw for almost 400 yards a game and put up the numbers that he put up, and you still only go 6-6, I think that's telling. And they only return 5 guys from their defense from last year. So I mean, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, and looking at some of the, I guess, just looking at the schedule, I mean, it's just a shame that in cross division play, they'll draw Louisville and Malik Cunningham. So that doesn't help one bit with that defense at all. You look to Syracuse with Sean Tucker running the ball very well for Syracuse. That doesn't help at all either with their schedule. Old Dominion's a program on the rise, which I wouldn't say it's an upset alert, but Old Dominion can give them a run for their money. Ricky Ronnie's doing a great
Mm-hmm.
job out there in Norfolk. Miami, Tyler Van Dyke, we talked about, Grayson McCall and Coastal Carolina. So it's just like, I don't see the defense getting better in those games, and he will be in shootouts, but I just don't know how many of the shootouts will come out on top on. So Brendan Armstrong is a great talent. Another guy I've seen on draft boards, probably I think later in the first round. But yeah, just not helped out by his defense, like you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we've crossed roads. We talked about 6 quarterbacks and all. We started out talking about only 4 quarterbacks, but again, that just shows how deep the ACC is this year in terms of its quarterback group. And I'm excited to see this conference go, honestly. And I mean, we didn't even talk about a guy like DJ Uiagalelei, who has a chance to really right the wrongs of last year playing for a brand name program. We even talk about guys like that. So I'm excited for the ACC this year. I think year in, year out, the ACC is probably one of the I guess, depending on how you define the term top heavy, like where I guess you look at the Big Ten where it's always like 4 teams and like with like hardly any parity. I feel like the ACC has like the most parity from numbers 2 through 14, like the most parity
Right.
year in, year out. We all know about the ACC Coastal having, I think it was, well, every single team in the division went to the ACC title game in a 7-year period. That just speaks so much to the parity of that program. I tweeted out a couple days ago about growing up watching the ACC Wheel of Destiny. It just speaks to how much parity the conference has. So I'm excited for it this year. And yeah, that's really all I got, Bobby. Anything from you before we close out?
I think there's one more guy I would just like to hint at, and it's
Okay.
at Clemson, but it's not DJ Uga It's Cade Klubnik. And
Okay.
I think by the end of the year, he might be the guy that's getting the call. But I think in the coming years, I think he is extremely, extremely talented. And I think he has an opportunity to be very special.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not as familiar with Cade Klubnik's play. Did he play extensively last year, or like have I guess good playing time in any games last year?
He's a 5-star freshman coming in.
Oh, he's a freshman. Okay.
Yep.
So shades of Trevor Lawrence for sure. Trevor Lawrence and
Yes.
Kelly Bryant. Which
Yep.
I felt bad for Kelly Bryant at the time,
I
and I
really
still
did
do.
too.
Yeah, I still do. But I guess shades of that there. So if you're a Clemson fan, that's good news repeating history. So Be excited if you're a Clemson Tigers fan. But thanks for bringing that up, Bobby. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I mean, hope to chop it up with you in the future too. This is very fun.
Absolutely. I always love talking college football with anybody, and I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Omar.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm excited to see how the season unfolds, and yes, I'll continue to look at your previews and comment on them too as well. So until next time, everyone, thanks for tuning in. You can't see me because this camera malfunction, but just know I'm doing the peace signs, and peace, love, and soul, everyone. Goodbye.